All right, we are live. I'm going to share my screen so we can go through some perimenopause slides together. I'm really excited to talk on this today. It is such a huge topic. I know Ashley talked about cortisol recently, and it's interesting how much the perimenopause talk kind of ties into the cortisol talk as well. Because the more stressed we are, the more we are burning our candle at both ends, the crazier perimenopause can be. And so I'm really excited to talk about this, and it's affects so many people. So let me go ahead and make this full screen, make this a little smaller. Um, okay, so the tagline I put on here is it's time to become your own best advocate. And the reason I put that there, because there's so many like main things you would want to point out with perimenopause, but I think for most women, this is the point in our lives where things start to shift sideways, and what we used to do before, we can't get away with it anymore, and we can't just have like easy peasy textbook medical care at this point. It gets complicated. And we'll talk about that more, but it's like it is a complex issue. And what's very challenging is the lack of medical education and expertise around perimenopause and menopause. So, this is why I think it's so key and critical for women to become educated on perimenopause, their hormones, and the ins and outs of it, because unfortunately, we don't have doctors that we can turn to easily everywhere. It's like a very, very niche thing for doctors to be informed about. And it's your average OB-GYN, your average PCP may not fully understand the complexity. That's just the sad reality. So this is the time to make an effort and learn about these things so that because you can't just fall back on the healthcare professionals for the most part. Now there's some really good ones out there, but I will talk on exactly this issue in just a second. So these are some of the statistics about perimenopause. Now, 1 billion women are in menopause this year. So it's going to be probably even more women in perimenopause, but that's 12% of the global population as it is. So this is a major group in our world. And if you look at the statistic further down, less than 20% of medical schools in the US include menopause education in required curriculum. Now, I would say that perimenopause education is even less than menopause because it is more of a roller coaster time in women's lives. And doctors, what I typically hear women say and share from their experiences is that their doctors tell them that their hormones are all over the place. There's no point in testing anything until they're in menopause, if that, you know? So I would say that less than 20% of medical schools are educated on menopause, but even less on peri. So this is kind of a no man's land as far as medical support goes. And what they do tend to offer is what they tend to offer any cycling woman, which would be birth control or surgical procedures like a uterine ablation or fibroid removal or hysterectomy or ovarectomy, ovary removal. They turn to those tools, and if they don't feel that those tools are needed or helpful, or you don't want those tools, then they don't really have anything else for you. And I'm making some generalizations again. I think there are some doctors who have pursued their own education in becoming more informed on these things and having more options for women. But by and large, this is the majority of what's going on for women every day. Now, perimenopause can start as early as your mid 30s. And Ashley and I will talk about what we really think about that, the timing of perimenopause. because there are certain things that can trigger it happening earlier or later. And so that's something to be mindful of. But perimenopause can last 4 to 10 years, sometimes longer. So it's not like a quick transition. It's not like 6 months of, irregularity and then okay, now I'm in menopause, I've moved on. Unfortunately, it's something that can go on for quite a long time. This is a huge chunk of your life. It can affect your work, your relationships, so many things. And when I think about the pressures that are on women in their 30s, but even more so in their 40s. Now, perimenopause, I would say, is more common in the 40s. And this is the time when our kids are older, our parents are older, our careers are more demanding typically. There's so much on our plate. So I have so much compassion and empathy for women going through perimenopause with all the responsibilities that they have. So, I know I'm kind of like just jumping in here, but it's such a big issue. And unfortunately, over 85% of women experience noticeable symptoms, but only 25% receive treatment. And I would say even that quote unquote treatment is usually not comprehensive. It's usually not including diet, lifestyle, nutrients, um, sleep, stress management. I don't think that 25% treatment is even what it should be. So, all that to say, there is vast room for improvement with women's healthcare in this area. And so Ashley and I, of course, are passionate about giving you as much information as possible so that you're not one of these women who's just kind of white knuckling it through, thinking that they can't do anything about it. Um, and on top of all of this, perimenopause women are frequently misdiagnosed. So if they're not given birth control or surgical options for treatment, then maybe they're just like given an anxiety medication or antidepressant. This happens all the time. And I've met so many women where like they were getting into that perimenopause and menopause stage and they're experiencing all these mood swings and different issues going on and overwhelm and anxiety, issues they've never had before. And the doctor just reaches for that prescription. And what's really sad about that is that not only are the real underlying issues overlooked and neglected, meaning you've got actual tangible health outcomes that are less optimal and more harmful because those needs weren't actually addressed. On top of that, we have the downsides of those prescriptions that can cause other symptoms, other nutrient deficiencies, throw off your microbiome. There's all these other issues that happen with those prescriptions. So it's almost like a double whammy outcome when a woman goes to a regular doctor and gets the regular treatment and you know it's just a mess. So we could do so much better. One of the things that I think is really important too with perimenopause is the thinking that most people have is that their health just started to fall apart, and reality is our health right now is the accumulation, it's the summary of all the micro events, all the micro choices, all of the exposures, and all of the things that we, kind of overlooked before for the last decade or two. So, and I don't mean to say this to be negative towards you at all, but it's just more so giving yourself grace and giving yourself time and compassion when you're trying to address these things. It might not be super quick and easy fix to address them because it's been years and years of overworking, undersleeping, maybe drinking a little excess alcohol, maybe have experienced some toxic relationships. I've seen it for myself, for my girlfriends, for different people in my life where you maybe don't have the boundaries that you should, and you allow certain toxic situations to drag on, and it can really, really affect your health. So there's a lot of different things. Sedentary lifestyle is huge. The way that we live our lives before perimenopause can increase or decrease what that looks like, how dramatic it looks like. Um, Processed foods, if we're undernourishing, and it means like one way of undernourishing would be undereating, right? That would be one way to burn out your hormones faster and go into menopause faster because your body literally doesn't have the building blocks to make hormones and focus on anything like fertility, But another way of undernourishing, you might be eating tons of food, but it might be processed food and devoid of real nutrients, real electrolytes, real minerals. You get that from whole foods. And so if you're eating a lot of processed foods, you're not only getting a lack of nutrients, you're getting an excess of chemicals and shelf stabilizing things that make the food last longer, but it really makes you last less longer, if that makes sense. So that would be another thing that really kind of from years of different choices there. And then sadly, birth control. This is one of the main tools that doctors have for younger women that are experiencing hormone issues. And fortunately, it can set us up for a more dramatic perimenopause transition because we went years without having ovulation, which produces progesterone, which is very protective, very balancing. And so we go without that for a long time. It kind of masks the symptoms and the issues that were going on. And then you take that birth control away, and then it can get really dramatic with the side effects. And unfortunately, it also affects your gut microbiome, which can then increase cortisol issues and adrenal stress and sleep issues and all kinds of things going on there. Your detox pathways are affected. That affects your estrogen. So the birth control long-term use, I feel like sadly sets us up for a harder time, and kind of makes, even if we're doing everything right, like that can make nutrient deficiencies. It does deplete really key nutrients like zinc and folate, and a lot of B vitamins, magnesium. And those are so important for our wellness, for our well-being, and for our hormone health and all of that. So, um, those are just some things that can happen before we get to perimenopause. So
I
we
would
can't
add on
just
that too.
blame perimenopause. It's like all of the things leading up to that point. What did you want to add, Ashley?
Oh, I was just gonna say like birth control use like during perimenopause too can also impact things significantly. And I see that with a lot of women because they're like, well, I don't want to come off of it because, it's keeping me from having these awful cycles. But in reality, like your hormones are trying so hard to fluctuate. There's so many hormonal fluctuations that are going on during perimenopause. And then when you're just suppressing what your hormones are supposed to naturally be doing, then it's going to make things even worse, like long term. And so it can actually like really exacerbate a lot of those perimenopause symptoms or even those menopausal symptoms once you get to that point too. And so while it's like, yeah, you may be having like really heavy periods and like things might really suck for a little bit, like it's worth it to kind of power through some of that a little bit so that you can actually get to a solution because that's going to set yourself up for more success like down the road versus just masking those symptoms in the moment. So,
Absolutely. And there's a lot of different options. I know a lot of women ask me about IUDs, they ask me about oral, and I think in my experience, there's typically more downsides to oral birth control.
mhm,
But there's also downsides with IUDs that can't really be ignored either, where like the Mirena is more of a progestin,
mhm,
which is a synthetic progesterone. It has zero effective progesterone. It's not helpful like progesterone is to your
right.
health, and it can increase your risk for breast cancer. It's just not a
Well, and
great.
especially in perimenopause, when estrogen is kind of taken up and then we don't have that actual progesterone to balance those things out, like it really does impact things,
Yeah.
especially like mental health issues too. Like I see that with a lot of women who are going through perimenopause and they have like a lot of anxiety and stuff like that. And maybe we'll get to this at some point else and talk more about it. But that can actually cause, those anxiety symptoms to be even worse because you don't have that calming effect of progesterone when you really need it the most. So,
Well, and on top of that, think about the nutrient deficiencies that I just mentioned. Zinc.
hmm
If you lower zinc, then you have typically a higher copper to zinc ratio,
hmm
which can be more mood altering and stimulating for like anxiety and insomnia issues and stuff like that. So that's one. Then there's B vitamin nutrient deficiencies that can be caused, which really help us handle stress better. And then we've got magnesium deficiency, which we all know really helps with sleep and stress as well and inflammation. So, like, of course, we're not going to feel great on those things. I mean, I get that, like, there's some situations where there's really, really drastic, heavy bleeding to the point where it's like, dangerously low ferritin, like different
Right.
situations. I'm just speaking in general terms here. There's always exceptions to these generalizations, right? And so we want to have like a personalized discussion one-on-one with people, but how they need to decide for themselves might look differently than what we're talking about generally here. But for the most part, we do have to have more honest conversations with women about the downsides. And,
Mhm.
most doctors are just handing it out like candy and not really explaining what shifts are going to happen when you're on that, especially long term. And the copper IUD is hormone free, but it's got copper, and copper is absorbed through that region. And so it can still have kind of a copper dominance effect, which can lead again to those types of symptoms of anxiety and um, insomnia and mood issues like Ashley was talking about. So, anyway, just important to be aware at least and be informed at the minimum. And then, looking into different options if that's something you're comfortable with. But at the very least, supporting yourself nutritionally and in other ways as much as possible if that's something you don't want to let go of. Or working with someone like Ashley and I to support your body so that at least you can transition off of it a lot less dramatically than just going cold turkey. Um, so most women, when it comes to getting older, going into perimenopause, these are the things that I feel like are so prevalent for women. They think they're just stressed, they're just tired, they're just getting older, and that it's normal. And again, like 73% or more of women have significant disruption to their daily life from symptoms. I mean, I saw a post the other day, a woman commented, and she was like, if I don't get my hormones figured out, I may lose my marriage. And she was not joking. Like it really impacts people's lives. And so it just shocks me that like we're barely scratching the surface from research and the medical route or medical side of things, even making an effort in this area of health. Like we desperately need it. So I say all that in order to just reiterate that we need to speak up. We need to reach out for help and not just act like this is okay. It's not okay. And the fact that only 1 in 5 women seek help just like breaks my heart. And I've even met women that had so much anxiety that they never experienced before, and they had no idea that it was like perimenopause related. No idea. And they just like barely got through. And I'm talking about, a handful of years where they're just really struggling. And like, there's no need for that. There's so many things we can do naturally to support you. So, just an overview real quick of perimenopause symptoms. What does this even look like? What could show up when you go into perimenopause? Now, I will point out that you can have these kind of symptoms at pretty much any point of your life, We see women who are in their teens experiencing this, in their 20s experiencing this. It doesn't mean like it only happens in perimenopause. However, you might have had easy breezy living your whole life, and then all of a sudden perimenopause hits, and you're like, what is all of this hot mess going on? So if you're having irregular periods, or maybe you have regular periods, but they're just starting to get heavier than normal, or hot flashes are an obvious symptom, night sweats, sleep issues, insomnia, slowed metabolism, starting to gain a little weight in the midsection, even though you haven't changed anything at all, irritability, emotional, teary-eyed, like just on edge, brain issues, brain fog, anxiety, we talked about panic attacks, joint pain or stiffness, heart palpitations, histamine sensitivity, because that ties in with estrogen swings a lot, worsening PMS, lowered libido, vaginal dryness or painful sex, muscle loss. You start feeling a little fluffier and you're like, this is weird. Why do I feel so soft and smushy now? I don't have my muscle anymore. Low motivation and thinning and dry eyes. Of course, there's different things that can cause these symptoms, but these are just the ones that are going to typically be exacerbated or show up out of nowhere during perimenopause. So if I just like to point this out because so many women don't connect these issues with hormones. I think that the tide's shifting recently. I think more and more women are starting to realize like it's not in my head. I'm not just weak. I'm not just, emotional. Like there's an explanation behind these things. And so I think that's good. But we got to keep going beyond that to get to the root issues. So, a couple common misconceptions I think are going on is that perimenopause, you have to have irregular cycles to be in perimenopause. That's not true. You can have a regular cycle every single month, but it doesn't mean that your hormones aren't shifting. So, you might start having swings in estrogen, you might have lowered progesterone, you might have lower DHEA, you might have these hormone shifts, and your body might still be ovulating or producing estrogen, but it has to work harder now than before. And there's actually like blood tests that we can check to see like how hard is your body having to signal your ovaries to make hormones. And so it's like the louder it's having to tell the ovaries to make hormones, the closer you're getting to that time where they start to drop out. Um, Perimenopause happens in your late 40s, not necessarily like some women, they go, to their late 40s and beyond, or they start way earlier. Again, it just depends on the factors and the stressors that you've experienced beforehand. Genetics play into it too, but definitely, you can burn yourself out basically sooner. Hot flashes are the primary symptom of perimenopause. Now, hot flashes are common, but I would say there's many symptoms that are really, really common. So it is what it is. I just have to suck it up like my mom did. Heck no. Like so many people, just like any other health condition, they're like, oh, well, my mom had really bad hot flashes. That's just how it is. I'm like, what? No, I mean, I get it. If you've tried literally everything and they're still like difficult, and then maybe you can do some hormone therapy or something. But like, there's just so many ways we can support things now that you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suck it up. So what gives? What specifically is starting to shift clearly with perimenopause? Number one, our progesterone starts to decline. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. I'll talk about these hormones in a little bit more. But progesterone is the big first pillar that crumble. And it is so, so helpful for our health, for our mood, for our sleep. So many benefits, and it's very protective against breast cancer and uterus health and all these things. So I think progesterone is really key for us to try to optimize and hold on to as long as possible. And this comes back to ovulation. So I think that, for our younger women, we really want to focus on nourishing your body so that you can ovulate as long as possible and get that progesterone production naturally for as long as possible. Because the sooner this issue begins, the more likely a bigger problem going on. Like if you are younger, I'm saying like in your 30s and you're having, or even early 40s and you're having no progesterone, no ovulation, your cellular function, your mitochondria is involved in hormone production, and that's inside your cell. It's also involved in energy production. So if you are starting to drop in progesterone, we've got a whole body problem, not just a hormone problem. So we want to make sure you're nourishing your body and nourishing your cellular health. Very, very critical. Not something, in my opinion, that can be skipped. It's like if your provider is not working on your whole health and nourishing your body and focusing on that, that's a huge red flag right there. Especially if you're like in your 30s and your provider just gives you progesterone and isn't also working on all the other things too. That's a big red flag as well. Ashley, did you want to add anything about progesterone?
No, I think I mean maybe we'll touch on this in a little bit, but
Yeah,
that
I do have another slide on progesterone too.
okay, because that's a lot of times where like people are all of a sudden like I have all this anxiety, they go into perimenopause and they're like my anxiety is just like through the roof, and a lot of times it's because of that dip in progesterone. Um, because that leaves you, even though your estrogen may not be high, that's still going to leave you estrogen dominant because you don't have the progesterone to balance that out. And so that can cause a lot more anxiety, even like trouble sleeping and things like that. So
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. After that, typically or in conjunction, estrogen becomes erratic. And, Ashley it always surprises people when she tells them, like, yeah, estrogen can go really high during perimenopause because most people assume it's just going to gradually drop out. But instead, estrogen likes to go out with a bang and it's not going to go away quietly into the night. It goes bonkers and starts to become very erratic roller coaster. It can have these crazy spikes and these drops. So it is she's a drama queen for sure. Progesterone is like the BFF that kind of calms her down. But yeah, that one is a big deal. And so what we want to look into for your estrogen is one, cortisol, blood sugar, because those things affect your stress levels, and like these swings are going to make estrogen swings worse. Alcohol intake, unfortunately, that is not going to help our estrogen symptoms. And gut and liver health. So if you're constipated, if your liver health is like detox pathways aren't doing so great, which can be difficult to know. It's not really something you can have a clear symptom of. It's more so looking at labs a little bit and to figure out if your liver detox pathways are optimized or not. But those are really critical pieces when the estrogen starts to become so erratic. And then after that, or in conjunction, it can be the testosterone kind of slowly dropping a little bit as well. And again, this doesn't mean like this isn't only in perimenopause. We have women who are young who have low hormones. And again, it's more of a new nourishment issue, toxicity issue. We really have to like rebuild their health a little bit so that their hormones can come back on board. But essentially, that's what we're trying to preserve as much as possible during perimenopause. We have to think about the adrenals because the adrenals are really heavily involved in hormone production. And the ovaries, they have their time frame. Like once we go into menopause, like there's no woman who's going to go into her 80s with her ovaries still producing progesterone, right? But we can still be in our 80s and producing hormones from our adrenals. Our adrenals never quit on us. Not to be dramatic, but like ovaries kind of quit on us. But adrenals don't. And so that's why we really focus on adrenal function, adrenal health, because it can help so much with the hormone picture. And insulin and cortisol go hand in hand with our adrenals as well. And insulin can go haywire because estrogen helps with insulin regulation and sensitivity. And also, when our estrogen starts to drop down, I learned this recently, our GLP-1 levels start to drop down as well. We create our own GLP-1s that helps with hunger cues and satiety and insulin regulation and all that and inflammation. So when estrogen and GLP-1 starts to drop down, insulin sensitivity worsens and it's harder to have a balanced blood sugar at this stage of life. So it's easier to gain that weight in the midsection. It's easier to have more sugar cravings and more like emotional eating, like all the things kind of stack up at this time. So it's again, it's like we can't get away with the shortcuts we used in the past. We have to be a lot more intentional and become more like set ourselves up in all the different ways for success because in some ways it's almost like all the things are starting to shift out of whack and it's not easy. So again, this is why I think it's important for women to know all these pieces because you go to a doctor's office and they're not going to be informed or helpful for all of these pieces of the puzzle. So, one thing to clarify real quick is perimenopause and menopause. So, I think sometimes it can be a little confusing, but there is a little bit of hope going from perimenopause to menopause. Some things do improve, like the irregular and heavy periods, the crazy mood swings, the breast tenderness, the migraines, estrogen surges leading to things like fibroids and, more histamine flares with those estrogen spikes. So some of the drama kind of calms down once you're through perimenopause. But then there's some chronic issues in menopause that women certainly deserve just as much care at that phase of life as well. So, now one thing with the perimenopause, we want to make sure we're optimizing things at this phase so that we can set ourselves up for aging well, um, aging in a healthy way instead of being miserable in our older years. And I think at this stage, really, it's fair to really consider hormone therapy at this point because we don't have that ability anymore. Like we have that opportunity in perimenopause, but not as much in menopause. So that's a point where it's like, okay, this is probably the time to consider that. I know a lot of women are really nervous about hormone therapy, and I would say that's a valid concern. And there's natural ways to support a little bit, but in some ways it's necessary in my opinion to help you age really well and protect you against certain issues. But just we did do a hormone talk a while back, which you can see on our YouTube channel, and that goes into a lot more detail about hormone therapy and how to do it the right, safe way and avoid, the issues with hormone therapy. So, how do you know if you're in perimenopause? Now, the early stages are sneaky, like you're not going to notice anything drastic in early perimenopause. You'll probably still have regular cycles, but they might be a little bit more symptomatic and, worsening mood, heavier cycles, or, shorter cycles or longer cycles, things like that. Late perimenopause, you're starting to really skip cycles altogether. They're very irregular and all those symptoms worsen typically. And then in menopause is official when you've gone 12 months straight with no period at all. So just to kind of clarify what that means, all these different things. Now there are lab tests that we can look at to see If you're starting to get closer to menopause, the AMH is basically the marker that tells us how loud is your brain having to tell your ovaries to make hormones. So when it gets lower and lower, it's starting to shift over to peri and menopause. And FSH can swing all over the place, but if you're checking it, day 3 of your cycle is usually a good idea to check that with your estradiol and see where that's at because they are very closely linked together. Same thing with FSH. This is how loudly is your brain having to tell your body to make estradiol specifically. So um, as this gets higher and estrogen levels are normal or low, then we know, okay, this is starting to shift. And LH is typically over 30 once you're in menopause. And then progesterone, you want to be usually at least 5, if not higher. I usually like double that. But when you're in perimenopause, it's just getting lower and lower and lower over time with progesterone. And it's pretty much zero in menopause. So these are different things you can do to support yourself. I feel like there's a lot of tools Ashley and I like to use for clients, different supplements and different herbs and different things, but it's all personalized based on what comes up in testing. So, what I wanted to share is the key foundational things you can do. Any woman can benefit from doing these things, but especially again, as you get into that perimenopause stage and you can't get away with things as easily anymore and all the stuff is starting to stack up, these foundations become non-negotiables. I'll just put it that way. Alcohol and caffeine, the more you lean on these things for stress and for energy, the more you're taking it away from yourself in the long run. I promise you. It's a little rough at first when you are cutting back on caffeine because you actually feel how tired you are. But in some ways, that's a good thing because you need more sleep and you need more rest and you need more nourishment so that you have real energy and not just fake stimulated energy of caffeine. So I think that is really, really helpful. Alcohol, it just makes you feel like crap. It wears you out and it may help you go to sleep, but that means that your nervous system is so wired and fried, you really need more support and maybe like a bedtime routine, maybe some way to get your nervous system to relax, like an Epsom salt bath or meditation. I know all these things, like we've all heard them. Sometimes we need someone to tell us directly, like, hey, you really need to do that for yourself because the shortcuts are shortcutting yourself, really, truly. And
I'll add to
alcohol,
that one too. If we're going to drink alcohol, especially in perimenopause, when there are already like so many fluctuations, it impacts your body a lot more at this stage than it did when you were
yes,
younger. And so if you do choose to, every once in a while drink alcohol, like supporting your body with like plenty of magnesium and glutathione, like adding in
extra B
some
vitamins, yeah,
extra vitamins. Yeah, like if you are gonna have a couple of drinks here and there, like on those nights, like I would be adding in lots of liver support and things like that to try to mitigate the effects because it is gonna play such a, like it is gonna impact your body so much more at this stage in life than it used to. So,
for sure. And one thing I didn't mention yet, I guess specifically, is like when our estrogen starts to swing around and when it drops low, because as we get later and later in perimenopause, the more frequent our estrogen is low. And so that can lead to more like it impacts our immune system and it impacts our inflammation. And so we are more likely to develop like yeast infections and bacterial issues and like we're going to have more problems. And then alcohol is like the gasoline on that fire. It will
mm.
flare those things up. But then it also like depletes your body of nutrients. Like it's going to require more B vitamins and magnesium and nutrients to process alcohol toxins because it does produce more acetaldehyde in our body. So there's all kinds of things that can be going on. It can lead to fungal overgrowth in the body. So then we have those issues. Then we have more histamine issues, and we think it's hot flashes, but really it's like high cortisol and high histamine triggering the hot flashes. And then we have the wine doing that on top of it. Girl, just do yourself a favor, okay? We're just trying to, we're not saying this to be mean and to pick on you. We're saying this to help you because sometimes we just don't know that we're hurting ourselves like we are. And then I would say focus on increasing mineral-rich foods. This would be things like coconut water, celery juice, potatoes with the skins on, avocado, a little bit of molasses in your coffee if you want to be a little funky. Like me, people think that's weird, but I'm like, it's so mineral rich. There's so many different foods. You can just Google mineral rich foods if you want to. If you're not sensitive to iodine, seaweed is really, really good. Gosh, I don't know if you have any favorites, Ashley, that you really like to get your minerals from. Organ
No, I
meats,
mean,
organ pills, I should
yeah,
say.
I like the beef organ capsules because that's just easy. It's, it's not another thing I have to cook or buy from the grocery store. And I actually will like sprinkle that. This has nothing to do with menopause, but I'll actually sprinkle that sometimes on my kids' food too, just to get them some extra minerals because they don't notice it. So
Smart.
yeah, yeah. But I hadn't thought of the molasses in the coffee before. I'm gonna have to try that one. That's
Honestly,
cool.
it's not bad at all.
Yeah,
So
then that would probably actually be fine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then prioritizing protein intake. We talk about this for everybody. I mean, let's be real, because everybody needs to balance their blood sugar better. I heard a terrifying statistic the other day about like how many kids, teenagers are, I think it's 1 in 3 teenagers are
Yes.
pre-diabetic now. I'm like,
Maybe it's 1 in 5.
oh my God,
It's a lot.
it's so bad.
So
So,
bad.
I mean, it's not like protein is going to fix all of that, but it's critical starting point. You have to get your protein in, and I really recommend women prioritizing getting breakfast as much as they all want to fight me on it. You all want to take me down on this point, but I won't let you because I have seen it help you women all the time when they make an effort with their breakfast. I don't know why we hate breakfast so much as a gender, but like that's one of the things that women like really don't want to do.
Yeah.
But it's so important. And then if you have like appetite issues and you feel sick when you eat first thing in the morning, well, then we got to work on your gut. And then we can add in the protein that you desperately
And
need.
your cortisol too. A lot of people don't realize
True.
this, but it is if you don't wake up hungry in the morning, that's a sign that there's something off in your body. You should actually wake up hungry in the morning, and I see that a lot with cortisol issues too. It can be like a GI thing as well, but like cortisol issues can actually cause you to not be hungry in the morning as well. And so that was like the first thing I recognized when I was fixing my cortisol is I was like, oh my God, I am starving when I wake up. So
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then strength training. I mean, again, one of those like it becomes non-negotiable because unfortunately we are losing
Hmm.
DHEA and like our hormone building blocks and our testosterone and our estrogen. Like when these things start to shift downwards, our muscle retention is not easy. And so it's going to fade away if you're not strength training. And this also sets you up for healthy bones. This means less fractures when you're older, which is a major health risk when we're older, is fractures and UTIs. So hormones and strength training, like these are really key for aging well and being strong and healthy and capable. Like I
Yeah.
saw a doctor post the other day and he was like, you know, lifting and squatting, like for women, like, hey, this isn't just to look good. This is so that you can get off the toilet when you're older. This is so that you can wipe your own bum, like, not to be rude, but like, do you want to be independent? I sure as heck want to be independent when I get older. So I'm working out so that I can, you know,
Not just strength training with like little baby weights or
Yeah,
whatever, but like,
not
if
cutting it.
especially, yeah,
And
yeah,
the
the thing.
weighted vest, I love the weighted vest, but it's not strength training, guys.
No. And if you can, but if you can go into the gym or wherever you're working out with the intention of not just strength training, but actually building muscle, that's what's really going to set you up even more. I mean, doing something is going to be better than nothing. I'm not saying like the Pilates or the weighted vest or whatever, like that's great. Like I love that you're like people are doing that because it's better
Hmm.
than nothing for sure. But honestly, like one of the easiest ways to hack your health and hack your hormones is to build muscle, like intentionally go in to actually put on some muscle mass. And that can sound scary to some women, but the more muscle that you have on your body, the better your testosterone levels are going to be. So if you're concerned about having low testosterone or whatever, and you're not strength training it to build muscle, like that's a great place to start. The other thing too is your metabolism is going to be so much faster if you have more muscle mass. And so it's literally like one of the easiest, not easiest because you have to actually do the thing, but it's one of those things that like really and truly can set you up for success in so many areas. So
Yep, for
one of those
sure.
things.
I could go on and on about strength training, to be honest, but I know I have to keep going through the rest of the
Yeah, right.
information, but it is so, so, so important. Morning and evening light exposure, if at all possible. I know some lifestyles and work situations don't allow for this perfectly, but if you can get at least one option, either morning or evening or both, that would be great. But the more light exposure directly to your skin, you don't have to stare at the sun, but you don't want to have like shades on that are covering your light because your eyes have light receptors in them. And so it's good to get that light exposure. It helps your circadian rhythm, it helps your hormones, your adrenals, your cortisol, everything. We are very circadian rhythm beings. Like we have a rhythm, and if we don't follow that rhythm, we do have some negative effects from that, whether we like it or not. So the more you can adjust to that uh, routine, the better, obviously. And then quality sleep. So if you're getting up multiple times a night to go to the bathroom, or you're waking up, just your brain or your liver or whatever is going on, that's something that we would want to dig into specifically for you and personalize the support plan for you to fix that so that we can make sure you're getting quality sleep. Optimizing your gut, thyroid, blood sugar, and cortisol. These are pillars for your health, for your perimenopause experience. And if your gut's off or your thyroid's off, or your blood sugar, cortisol, that's it. You're going to have issues for sure. So those are the key critical areas that Ashley and I would assess and optimize for sure. And so these are some of the important health assessments. Like when I think back to the women, only 1 in 5 asking for help, it's like, oh my God, how many women are just have no idea what's going on with their thyroid, no idea what's going on with their hormones or their nutrient levels. And we could completely change like women's experience during this time of their lives. And guess what? That means their husbands and their kids and their parents and their work colleagues also get to experience a better version of you, which is nice for them, but obviously more importantly, it's about you. So, um, but it just affects so many people beyond just you too. Um, and I did want to talk about hormone support because there is a time and a place for it. But I would say, in my opinion, this is just my 2 cents, in your 30s, shit is typically too soon. Like there's so much more capacity for your own body to be producing hormones on its own. And I don't want to use band-aid shortcuts and overlook like the actual health of your ovaries and your brain signaling and your blood sugar and all these things that should be in place. Because again, when we do that, we neglect the foundations that led to those hormones being low, well, then we're missing the boat completely. Like, then you're going to have other health issues and be at risk for different diseases, literally, because we're just giving you hormones instead of actually making you healthy, you know? So 30s, in my opinion, is too soon. Now, we might use a little bit short term while we're working through things because, again, it's not like an overnight fix when we're working on the foundations. But that is definitely case by case if we use it at all. But again, there's herbs, there's like Vitex, chasteberry, and different nutrients that we can help support your own production of progesterone naturally. And then in the 40s, I would say I would really encourage women like don't start with hormone therapy, like start with the foundations and the initial supports and then see how far you can get without it. Because a lot of times women don't need the hormone therapy that they thought they did. Their hot flashes go away or their cycles become regular again. And some of them are mad at me because they're like, oh, Rebecca, I didn't want to have my period again every single month. I don't like having a healthy period. And I'm like, well, hate on me all you want, but this is going to make you healthier. It's going to protect your bones better. It's going to protect your heart better. It's going to protect your mood better. Like, you know, sorry I'm helping you be healthy and having periods, but like it is absolutely a vital sign. So, like, if your periods are starting to change early, that's one of your key vital signs, just like your blood pressure and your body temperature. Like, it's critical. But if you do all those things and you're still struggling a little bit, we might use something low dose, a little bit of support. And then in the 50s is when it is usually pretty much needed at that point for most people. But again, we're not going to skip the foundations for anyone. So I want real true health for everyone that works with me. So, 30s, 40s, and 50s are all going to get the foundational support and assessments and everything. But the 50s is when it's really starting to become likely that they would benefit from hormone therapy. If we do anything, it's usually like DHEA or progesterone, just because those are more protective, especially progesterone. I think that one is underutilized a lot. I feel like it doesn't get enough attention. I feel like testosterone is being handed out like crazy, estrogen patches and gels and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, where's the hype around progesterone? Because I think progesterone's pretty amazing. But that's just me. And then once you're postmenopause, we might partner with a provider to prescribe more like higher doses or oral progesterone or different things that might be a better fit for you. Now, I wanted to just talk about progesterone, like some of the hormones, real quickly, and then we'll wrap up. But progesterone, I did want to touch on. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but birth control pretty much stopping progesterone production. Um, and it really helps with so many different things. It helps calm the nervous system. It improves your sleep. It's better stress resilience. So even though life is still crazy, you're not as raw from it all. It protects against breast cancer. It protects your uterine health. You're less on edge. You protects your bone health. And typically, like if we are overdoing it, or if we have high stress or high cortisol, or we're undernourishing, under eating, or processed foods or whatever, that's when we're going to start to see that low progesterone. So again, this can happen earlier in life if we are pushing ourselves too much and not giving us ourselves the support we need. And I did make a note at the bottom here because every now and then some women are like, oh my God, I tried progesterone and it was a disaster for me. So if that were to happen, I know that that's an issue with their liver, detox pathways, their gut, or histamine issues, or all of the above. Unfortunately, often it can be all three of those things, because the progesterone needs to be processed through the liver and, metabolized and everything, and the gut. And so those issues can make it harder for your body to adjust to the progesterone support, especially with high estrogen going on and the high histamine issues. Progesterone sometimes can um, like cause a little bit more of a histamine dump initially. So again, this is where things can be it's not super straightforward and cookie cutter as far as how everyone's going to respond to progesterone. Even something as calming and wonderful as progesterone, certain women need to do some other foundational work first on their gut health, especially, and then they can benefit from that progesterone. It's not that you don't need progesterone and that it's bad for you. It's just that your body is so dysregulated and imbalanced and having so many issues that we got to adjust that first, and then you can benefit from the progesterone easier. So hopefully that makes sense. You can also do really tiny, tiny doses so that that transition and that adjustment with histamine and everything is less noticeable.
And
Um,
also like dosing or utilizing it with the cycle too, rather than just like taking it all the time,
yeah,
so that you're utilizing it when your natural cycle would be. So you kind of that's kind of what we do
for
typically,
sure.
kind of schedule the progesterone to be, around the time that it would naturally be higher during your cycle to mimic a natural cycle versus, just taking it all the time. So.
Absolutely. And some doctors, like once you're in postmenopause and you're not having a period anymore, and you're not having a cycle anymore, sometimes they'll have you do like a standard dose of progesterone all month long, but that kind of depends on the situation. But yeah, for women who are still having cycles, you definitely do not want to be taking progesterone every single day because that's going to mess with your brain signaling and your cycle rhythm and all of that. So definitely don't do that. DHEA is a precursor to testosterone and estrogen. So we have to be really smart when we use DHEA. And this is again why Ashley and I, we have to do assessments. We can't just say, oh, you have hot flashes, or oh, you have this issue, take some DHEA, take some progesterone. We really have to do an assessment for you so that we know what's going to help and what's potentially could be harmful. Because if you already have high testosterone, like maybe you have hot flashes, but your testosterone is too high and your androgens are too much, well, we've got to fix what's driving that because we would basically add fuel to the fire if we added more DHEA. Same thing with high estrogen. If you had low testosterone and we're like, oh, you need DHEA to build your testosterone up. Well, unfortunately, it adds to estrogen as well. So if you have high spikes of estrogen, this is not the time. So we really want to be prudent about when we utilize these things. But DHEA is made by the adrenals. So again, this is a hormone that the adrenals produce, and we have to focus on your stress levels, your nourishment of your body, your sleep cycle, all these things that affect your adrenals, your blood sugar. These are huge for what your adrenals are capable of doing hormone wise. It is a really great building hormone. So if you're low in DHEA, typically we're low in testosterone first, generally, for most women, and then estrogen. And so we're going to have like more muscle loss and a lot of those like testosterone symptoms like low libido, low energy, all those things. A lot of times DHEA is low first. And so that is key, and it really helps to balance out cortisol. So it's a lot like progesterone, in my opinion, where it's balancing out the cortisol, like progesterone balances out the estrogen, and it really takes a hit when we're overdoing it and we're undernourishing and overstressed. So again, we don't want to use DHEA if there's already excess of testosterone or estrogen, but it is a great tool when it's appropriate.
And I want
And
to just like point out too, so this is kind of the difference between like how Rebecca and I work with our clients versus how your doctor works is like we are not just looking at these individual markers, right?
true.
So we're looking at your blood work. We're not just looking to see, yep, within range, within range, within range. We want to look at the ratios between these things because you can be on the very like low end of DHEA, right? And your cortisol might be normal, but your DHEA is on the low end. Well, you don't have enough or you don't have enough DHEA to balance out cortisol. Okay. So you want those two to be in a good relationship with each other. And then the same thing like with estrogen and progesterone. And I see this all the time, where women have been told their labs are normal, but their
Mm-hmm.
estrogen was actually on the high end of normal and their
Yep.
progesterone is on the low end of normal. So they're feeling that estrogen dominance significantly, even though things were quote unquote normal. And so that's why when we look at things, we are looking at the ratios between these things to make sure that things are well balanced. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
true.
such a good point. Number one, we have a different range of what we call normal. And number two, we do not look at markers in isolation.
Mhm.
That is probably the most night and day difference between your standard, you know, Western doctor looking at blood work versus a functional provider because we really look at more of a constellation of things and we understand what is leading to those imbalances. That's the most important. And that's also why, just a little side note, that's also why I it's so important for you guys to give us all of the information in your intake forms because that's why we ask a million questions. Because we're trying to figure out what caused these test results. We're not just treating the paper and the numbers and like once those numbers are fixed, we're like everything's fine. No, we're looking at the whole picture. We're looking at how you feel. We're looking at your history, your diet, your sleep, your bowel movement regularity, like everything, because we understand how much all of those things affect your test results and what those numbers look like. And so we're trying to figure out which levers in your lifestyle and your diet and your sleep, like which levers can we adjust to get you better outcomes on your next test results, not just throwing another pill at you or hormones at you and calling it a day. So, great point, Ashley. And then estrogen is, obviously really dramatically helps with hot flashes, vaginal dryness. Now, I have had some women be very successful using DHEA or pregnenolone, like there's vaginal suppositories that are very safe, and you can use those if you're, nervous about estrogen directly. But it's so important. I recently learned that like 50% of menopause women have genitourinary issues. It's called genitourinary syndrome for menopause women, and it affects not just the vaginal region, but the bladder heavily. So, and I don't know about you guys, but I've been exposed to like a lot of elderly women getting UTIs and getting very sick and doctors not realizing what the issue is and sometimes that it gets septic. It's a very big problem and another sign just in your older folks in your family and that the dementia like the brain fog and the like it seems like they're losing their mind, like memory and focus and everything, but it can be a UTI if that's flaring up out of nowhere. Check for a UTI and advocate for them to get on some low dose, microdose of estrogen vaginally to protect them because, again, like I mentioned earlier, estrogen affects our immune function and protects us against infections. So it helps our bone health, our heart, our muscle retention, mood, all these different things. So once we get into past the spikes and the roller coaster and we're chronically low, that's when that is a valid conversation to have about some low dose or, some estrogen support when needed. We don't want to jump to this too soon because of all the reasons we just talked about. But this is something we can, think about at a certain point. And I will say we don't ever want to use estrogens without progesterone as well. I don't care about the form, whether it's vaginal or patch or whatever. I don't feel comfortable with a woman being on estrogen without progesterone, balancing the effects of estrogen as far as breast cancer and uterine issues and I just don't like it. That's me. I'm a stickler on that one. And
Yep.
also making sure you're monitoring your breast health and your reproductive health with scans, with, exams, and 100% like checking your estrogen metabolites on a urine test, like the Dutch test. I just don't feel like it's safe for women to be using estrogen if they don't know what's happening with that estrogen because like how Ashley was talking about the ranges and the ratios and how so often it's called normal. Well, even if we have, let's say your estrogen to progesterone ratio is perfect, that's great. But if your estrogen, if the majority of your estrogens are being metabolized down a pathway that increases risk of cancer or tissue growth, either one of those scenarios is not a good, it's not protective and it's harmful. And so you can have normal estrogen, you can have optimal levels, but we want to make sure that estrogen is safe for you. So there's a protective pathway with estrogen. That's the ideal. And we want most of your estrogen to be going down that pathway. And what's nice is once we test this in the urine and we see where you're at, one, we could see that everything looks great in your pathways. I'm like, okay, we can like feel really good about using estrogen hormones safely and, having minimal risks with it. Or we might see that you've got an elevation of a metabolite that's increasing growth or increasing cancer risk. Well, there's natural things we can do to help shift the estrogens down the protective pathway. Like there's so much that we have control over and have influence over. And so I just want to empower women to be able to use these tools safely and optimally. So that's my 2 cents on estrogen in a nutshell. Anything
And
to add
on
to
top of
that?
that, too, like a lot of people are very, very hesitant to use estrogen replacement therapy even though, they're already in menopause and not producing enough on their own, right? And they're very hesitant because they've heard so many of the risks that come with it, but it can be done in such a safe way. Like if you are checking your Dutch test and making sure that, it's being detoxed correctly, like nobody's going to give, or at least if you're working with a good provider, they're not going to give you an excess amount of estrogen. They're going to give you like usually not even what your body would naturally be producing. And so a lot of people have this fear about it. And it's like, well, your body was producing estrogen naturally anyway, and there were no issues. So there really and truly shouldn't be, if it's being done the right way and it's a bioidentical and all the things, if it's being done the right way, there should not be really a lot of health risks long term with it. So, but it has
Hmm.
to be, again, being done the right way, not
Yep,
just
for
throwing
sure.
estrogen and hoping it sticks.
Yep, absolutely. So, just in summary, I wanted to reiterate that women deserve support at all stages of life. Doesn't matter if you're young, middle-aged, or older, you deserve support if you are struggling. I just want that statistic to improve. I would love it if 4 out of five women sought help instead of 1 out of 5. So everyone deserves that. You're not weak or broken. This is, not your fault. You're not just, a moody biatch, no offense, but like some women like feel like, "Oh my God, what is wrong with me? I'm so mean. I'm such a mean mom. I'm such a mean partner. I have zero patience. I have zero capacity." Like it's not you. And you don't have to drag this out. Like, ask for help sooner than later. You can lessen the drama of perimenopause naturally. You don't have to. Now, there's a time and place for anti-anxiety and depression meds and all that, but there's so much that we can do for women and help them and make this, maybe it's not perfect. Like, I don't know that everyone can experience a completely symptom-free perimenopause 100% of the time, but we can drastically improve things for sure. And then getting a full assessment, not a 10-minute appointment and a prescription. Like, you deserve that. You deserve a full assessment. You deserve someone really looking through things and figuring it out. I had one lady recently fill out a clarity call form. We do free clarity calls for people who want more information to figure out if this is a good fit to work with us. And on her form, she said she just wants somebody who won't stop when the first test result comes back and everything looks normal because she doesn't feel well, she doesn't feel right, and she just wants someone to not stop looking for answers. And I'm like, girlfriend, sign me up. I am all for it. I will say it's rare for me to find a test where I can't find something to to work on and improve. But so she definitely won't have that issue. But it's like, man, how many times do women go and are told everything's normal? It must be in their head. Go see a psychiatrist. I'm like, wow. And they barely did any assessment to begin with. Let's be real. Um, Not a full thyroid panel, not checking nutrient levels. Like, come on. So, yeah, that's my summary, little sassy summary today. And this is how you can reach out if you need anything or comment on the live. So reach out if you have specific questions. We love to support you. And thank you so much for today. I know we went a little long, so thanks for checking all this out and learning. So have a good one, guys. Okay, cool. You're muted in case you didn't realize.
Okay.
Awesome. Hopefully you weren't muted and trying to say something at the end there because I
No, I
just
was not.
kept
I
going.
just
Okay,
kept it muted because there's, people in my house and I never know
nice.
what's going to happen.
Yeah, true. Awesome. Well, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thanks for hopping on today and
Yeah. I have this call with Alan here in a bit, so.
cool. Your face. I'm gonna get started on the outline with Laura for the peptides talk next week. I think she's gonna do the slides, but I'll just check with her on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know if you need anything on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like we'll cover everything you would want to bring up anyway, but if for some reason you have something like, oh, I really want us to cover this, just text me.
I will.
All
Okay.
right.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.